China is one of the oldest countries in the world, with rich and bloody history dating back thousands of years. Ancient China was grouped into dynasties who waged war against each other for rule and power, until the Qin dynasty united China into one empire in the classical age. Modern unified China still holds on to those ancient traditions and values, one of these being Confucianism. Confucianism is a system of thought and behavior emphasizing virtue, morality, respect for community, and social harmony. These are building blocks for Chinese culture today. There are 7 characteristics of culture that any country can be defined as. The first one being collectivism. Collectivism is the degree to which people tend to emphasize group identity, social harmony, and the well-being of in-groups. China is highly collectivistic, and people work towards the common good of society in keeping harmony. One of the ways to keep harmony is by face or reputation. They either save face or give face to others to protect the harmony and avoid conflict. The second characteristic is uncertainty avoidance. That is how a culture tolerates and accepts unpredictability. China is low in uncertainty avoidance. Because of this, they do not like things like strict laws and they like to bend the rules. Third characteristic is power difference. This is how acceptable a culture views the unequal distribution of power. China is high in power difference, and because of this, low-powered individuals are unable to speak openly about their problems and pains. The fourth characteristic is context. That's the degree to which speakers presume the listener shares their viewpoints. China is high in context because of their collectivistic nature, and because everyone assumes that they share their viewpoints, they use things like ambiguous language, indirect speech. They focus on nonverbal communication because there's not a lot of verbal communication going on. The fifth characteristic is emotional display. These are norms regarding how people should and shouldn't express emotion. They are low in emotional display, and this is because they are trying to be polite, to not affect anyone and cause conflict, which would affect social harmony. The sixth characteristic is masculinity, and this is how a culture values the accumulation of material wealth as an indicator of success, assertiveness, and personal achievement. China is high in masculinity, and Chinese individuals are hardworking, disciplined, and driven to succeed most often. The seventh characteristic is time orientation. Polychronic time orientation is how a culture does not view time as a resource to be saved or spent. And because they're not focused on time, they're more focused on having a good time while they're there and having good relationships. And polychronic time orientated cultures most often don't really care about punctuality as much as enjoying their time. So some communicational aspects to consider of China. First being indirect speech, meaning they rely less on words and more on verbal communication, such as body gestures. Refusals. China is bad at refusing because sometimes refusing can cause conflict, which would affect social harmony. And most often they would say things like okay or alright instead of simply no. Eye contact. China views not sharing eye contact as being polite. And silence. They view silence as them simply thinking about what to say, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. So, how to properly communicate with Chinese individuals. Avoid physical touch. They find physical touch with new people not correct. How to avoid eye contact. Don't look them in the eyes because they might find this unpolite. Don't speak more than needed. Because of how they use ambiguous language and indirect speech, they don't speak much and they focus more on context instead of content. And understanding when a person is refusing. Because They do not like to refuse. Whenever someone says okay or right, you need to understand that it's not probably okay, and they really don't want to do it, but they're just